Picture, if you will, a decade where peace and love were the rallying cries. Yet beneath the surface, a darker current seemed to flow during a time when the quest for states of higher consciousness intermingled with the occult, as the counterculture danced dangerously close to the edge of the abyss. Welcome to an alternate view of the 1960s here on Things Visible and Invisible. Gary Lachman is an American author and lecturer known for his exploration of consciousness, counterculture, and the Western esoteric tradition. Before becoming a full-time writer, he was a founding member of the rock band Blondie and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2006. Since 1996, however, he has written extensively on topics ranging from the evolution of consciousness to literary suicides, popular culture, and the history of the occult. His 2001 book, Turn Off Your Mind, The Mystic 60s and the Dark Side of the Age of Aquarius, delves into the mystical and occult influences that permeated the 1960s counterculture. And he joins me down the line from his home in London. Gary, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
Well, thank you very much, Seán, for inviting me to be on the show.
Now, Gary, I was very much looking forward to this conversation for all sorts of reasons, but one of the problems I have with it is I'm not sure where to start. It's almost like a kid in a sweet shop. There's so much we could get into. What I would like to do is sort of give a frame of reference, though. The first thing I'd like to define, or you to define, is what time frame are we talking of the 1960s?
Well, if we're talking about what I call, or what has been called, the occult revival of the 1960s, I would say it starts in 1960 proper, and of all places in Paris. And this is the Paris of existentialism and Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir and being engagé and all of that sort of thing. Very black and white and Marxist. And in the middle of that, this book called Le Matin des Magiciens, or The Morning of the Magicians, in its English translation, or the Brit translation was The Dawn of Magic, I think, when it first came out. This was a book that one would not have thought to have been as successful as it was. But it was a book that was just jam-packed with a lot of strange things, more things in heaven and earth than I dreamt of. Especially in Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialism, their philosophy at the time. And it was as if, as I say in the book, Turn Off Your Mind, it was as if a UFO had landed, in front of the Café du Magot or something like that. And then everything was in this weird Technicolor. And it's written by two fellows, Louis Paul, who was a journalist on Le Figaro, and Jacques Bergier, who was a physicist, and who claimed to have been in contact with the famous alchemist Fulcanelli, and I can't go down that rabbit hole. But the book is all about, in many ways, it's kind of started the popular trend of how modern science and ancient wisdom, actually there's a lot together in common about them. So what was going on at the time in, say, nuclear physics somehow resonated with what the alchemists were trying to do. But it was also the book that introduced, through a lot of popular readers, people like Aleister Crowley, famous dark magician of the 1960s, who was actually the eminence grise behind the whole kind of 60s counterculture, more or less, and Gurdjieff. And it also initiated the occult Nazi genre, a whole idea that did Hitler use black magic and all that kind of thing, which had been something going around in 40s France at a time. I forget the name of the book, but there was a book in French about all kinds of stuff. And much more stuff. You said where to start, and I almost said, Charles Fort said, well, you can start anywhere. A circle has no beginning. You can just, that's very Hegelian too. It's all in media res, so you just put your finger in anywhere and you start. So this book came out, and it was an amazing bestseller. And then in France, and then in English, and in UK and in USA. And it started this whole trend, a revival of popular occultism, you could say. And you can trace it in everything in the 1960s, in the comic books and films and television shows, certainly in the United States. And then it got the imprimatur of the most popular people on the planet, the Beatles, in 1967, when they released Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And on the cover is famously Aleister Crowley's on the cover, along with C.G. Jung, and Aldous Huxley, and a Swami or two. So it suddenly became, the most popular thing to do. And that lasted out until about sort of the end of the decade, where it went sour.
Okay, so that's a very interesting sort of frame of reference. I mean, you're right to warn us about rabbit holes. There's a lot of rabbit holes in this subject, but Gary,
well, there's more holes than anything else. That's the things.
Rabbits, certainly rabbits out of hats, but.
Right.
The thing that always, I mean, I've seen that book, the Morning of the Magicians. I've tried to read it. It's hard going in places because it's kind of, you can tell it's written by a journalist and it's a kind of sensational version of.
Oh yeah. No, it's
and it's a bit of a hodgepodge of many things. But the thing that always kind of makes me curious is not so much the book itself or even its subject matter, but where it came from. Do you know what I mean? I mean, was there a kind of esoteric, occultist background in Paris at that time in the 50s or earlier part? Or was it simply a kind of sensationalism with people, a bit like the Da Vinci Code later years, with an eye to a good story, this will sell, which in case it did?
Well, it's probably a bit of both. I mean, Louis Powell said that he claimed that he had attended some of Gurdjieff's, G.I. Gurdjieff, the enigmatic Armenian Greco esoteric teacher who came out of a collapsing Russia and appeared in the West in the 1920s. And he spent his last days in Paris. And he was there during the occupation in a tiny flat near the Étoile. And what he would do, his teaching method then, he was much older, and but he would cram as many people as he could into a tiny kind of a dining room around a table, and he would prepare the sumptuous meal. Then you get like 40 or 50 or who knows how many people around, and then they would do what he called toasts to the idiots, and this was a way of drinking vodka that loosened everybody up, and then Gurdjieff would be able to sort of see their essence and that kind of thing. In any case, Powell's claimed to have attended some of those, and then he wrote a very, very bad book about Gurdjieff. It's kind of a collector's item book, but it's a bad book. It's one of those books that the first time you're coming across this stuff, I mean, I found it and read it. It's a hodgepodge. And yes, Morning Magicians. It's a friend of mine said it's a crap book that changes your life. So it's not, it's full of holes. I said everything's holes. I mean, the book itself is just full of mistakes and all that, and it's written in this breathless pace. And someone here in the UK said, yes, it's very Gaelic, or Gallic, like very French. And yeah, but at the time there was nothing like it. There had been little things like Worlds in Collision, Velikovsky's book in the early 50s, and then the Lapsang Rampas, innumerable books about this was, I forget his real name, Cyril Hodgkins, I think he was, and he was a plumber somewhere or something like that. But he had a past life as this Tibetan yogi, and then he wrote a series of books about this under the name T. Lapsang Rampa. And so there were a variety of sort of other things like that here and there. But this was one that kind of bang, it really caught on. And not only the book was a bestseller, then they had this magazine called Planète. And that was again, that didn't translate into English, but on the continent, it was quite big. And it was the sort of thing that mixed bag. So they would have articles about surrealism, and then a story by Borges, or I don't know, some other kind of literary thing, and then whatever, the hidden rituals of the Rosicrucians or something like that. And it's the sort of thing that was a lot of fun, I would suspect, to people. But it's sort. I mean, their subsequent books weren't as popular, and at a certain point, that it all kind of faded. But by the mid '60s, in English, there was a book called The Black Arts by Richard Cavendish, who later went on to be one of the editors of the popular Man, Myth, and Magic series. There was actually a serious part. What do they call it? Whole part. I forget what it is. The kind of thing where you get a chapter every week, and at the end,
Yeah,
you subscribe, and you've got like a huge kind of collection.
that's
And it's very serious, articles in there. But this book was famously, Mick Jagger had a copy of it, and there's a story about him walking out of Watkins' bookshop, which is the famous occult magic bookshop in Cecil Court in the West End. So it became very, very fashionable, and for a time.
Well, we're going to get into this, but I'm just setting the scene here because the other person who sort of is the shadow across this, and I'm not sure why sometimes, is the man you mentioned earlier, Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley, from my understanding, died 1948. He died in a boarding house, penury, I think boarding house in Hastings. It was a kind of a very dilapidated end to somebody who had so many grandiose claims over the years. The mystery I have around this, Gary, is how within 20 years he had been rehabilitated into this kind of cult figure with not just the Beatles, but obviously Jimmy Page and various other entities. He became this kind of lodestar for so much of the popular culture of the 1960s. And I'm sort of scratching my head wondering, how does this translate from a boarding house in Hastings to suddenly a global phenomena?
Well, I mean, it was his early Tearaway Roaring Boy days that were more influential than his last days. Although, I mean, that was one of the connections. I mean, he was kept alive by Aleister Crowley. He spent his last days in a boarding house called Netherwood in Hastings. I contributed to a book about this, and he was kept alive mostly by contributions coming from a lodge of the Ordo Templi Orientis, that was one of the magical societies he was the head of at the time, by Jack Parsons. And this is another rabbit hole. He's the actual jet propulsion rocket scientist by day, who was a practicing Crowleyite magician by night. And L. Ron Hubbard gets all involved in that and winds up inventing Scientology now. So that's another story that's in the book. So there's like that's up until like 47. Crowley dies at 47. And then he's the beast is finally dead, and he's finally gone. And last scandal is how in Brighton, and I guess in the cemetery in Brighton, there was a reading of like Hymn to Pan or some outrageous work of his, and the city council said this would never happen again or something. So even in death, there was a scandal and all that kind of thing. And apparently his ashes have been thrown somewhere in New Jersey, where I grew up. So how strange. Eventually, that's another story. But one of the things that it was, it's a book. A book. This is back in those days, kids, when books actually had very big impact on people, and they were very, very popular. And there's a book called The Great Beast by John Simons, who was a writer and who got into a relationship with acquaintanceship with Crowley in his last days, and more or less wrote this biography of him, which is a hoot. I mean, people who like Crowley, like practicing Thelemites, and the Thelema is the name of is a Greek for will, and that's Crowley's, do what thou wills, the whole of the law. So this is his message. This is the word of the eon, and he was the avatar of the word of the eon and all this kind of thing. You hate this book because what Simons does basically he just gives Crowley enough rope and he hangs himself, and it's a great read. Now, I read it ages ago. I read it sometime in the late 70s, and it's a fun read. And obviously he's not a believer, but he kept putting out other editions. But this got him back in the sort of news again. And then there was another one, a book by Richard Campbell, who's the filmmaker Donald Campbell's father, who did Performance, which has got a lot of occult magical stuff in it. He wrote a book about Crowley the poet, and he thought Crowley was a great poet. So did Crowley. They were in a minority, but you never know. And so it's a slow kind of thing. And this book did it. This Morning Magicians kind of like pulled it out because it put this in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is the most famous secret occult society of the late 19th century. I mean, they're in there in Morning Magicians as well. I mean, everything's wrong. I mean, they a lot of stuff there. So it's I said it's full of holes, but it brought that out into a popular thing. So he was kind of like, and then with the 60s counterculture, he was considered a proto hippie.
Yeah.
All the drugs and all the sex. So there was around the same time as Sgt. Pepper came out, or it may have preceded it. And there used to be the International Times, IT, underground newspaper here in the UK. And they ran like a half-page piece about Crowley as kind of like, rediscovered, polymorphously perverse, just like us, took lots of drugs and wanted free sex and all that kind of thing. So he seemed to be a precursor of. And then, people like Timothy Leary picked up on. And the Beatles, actually, there was interviews where they're saying like, yeah, we're into, do what you like or something. They were misquoting him. So it became kind of this, the background.
Absolutely. When was that article published? What year are we talking?
Which one?
The Crowley, the reboot, if you like, of Aleister.
Oh, I think I think The Great Beast came out in 1951, I think.
Right. And then the article in the.
And then. Oh, in the article, I think I said that may have been 1966 or 1967. It was even leading up to around the same time as Sgt. Pepper coming out.
So,
because the other thing is, there's like, it's not exactly connected, but it is. There's like the story about John Lennon and Paul McCartney and the Indica Bookshop, and Lennon goes there and famously he asks, I think it was Barry Miles, who's still around, who's written about all this, but he wanted the book by Nietzsche, and they said Nietzsche, and he was mispronouncing Nietzsche. And then he winds up at Timothy Leary's book. But Leary himself was, influenced by Crowley and all that too. I'm saying this. It was the magic and the drug kind of revolution in some ways, because Crowley took lots of drugs, and when you take these drugs, magical things kind of happen and all that. So there was a kind of area where they bled into each other. Yeah. And once you had sort of the carrier thing, the drugs, then it spreads.
Gary, unfortunately, the clock has already beaten us. I knew it would on this discussion. We're just getting into this, but you've set it up nicely for our next episode, because you've given us a good sort of travel through some of the influences that were beginning to converge on the 1960s counterculture, and in the next episode we'll see that flowering, if that's the right expression, for how this permeates and plays out in people's lives. But for now, Gary, tell people where they can find out more about you and where they can pick up a copy of your book.
If you want to check me out, I have a website. It's gary-lachman.com. I'm on X, I think it's still called these days, or whatever, Facebook and all that kind of thing. And you can get my books wherever you get your books. Wherever that might be. So I've available wherever you buy books. I don't want to name any particular source, so I'll leave that up to you. And I'll tell you the truth. If you can wait, I have a new book coming out in November in the United States, in January in the UK, and it's called Touch by the Presence, and which is an allusion to a song I wrote when I was in Blondie that was a big hit here long ago, 1978. But it's about how I went from playing in rock bands to doing what I'm doing now.
Fascinating. For now, Gary, thank you so much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI-branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.